This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is what in tech we call a unicorn. This is the Pixel Watch by Google. Why do I say that? Because for years there were rumors about a Pixel Watch. We hoped there would be a Pixel Watch, and now finally there is. It's a smartwatch running Wear OS by Google. No surprise there. We've seen Wear OS on the Samsung Galaxy Watch 5 that I reviewed, but that was with Samsung's customizations, their One UI that made it sort of Tizen-like, which was Samsung's old OS. So this one is a little bit different, a little bit simpler and all that sort of thing. Now, one thing that we have to watch out for here, because this is a mature industry, almost 10 years old at this point for smartwatches, right? And when you jump in this late, is this going to seem a little out of date? We're going to find out now. Well, looks-wise, this is certainly not out of date. Now, I can understand this is certainly a quantum leap from the Apple Watch Ultra we recently reviewed. For those of you who like big, heavy, utility-oriented or masculine watches, traditionally what's called masculine anyway, this is the opposite, isn't it? This is a very minimalist, very rounded, pebble-like, Zen-looking watch. I think it's very pretty, but I can understand if you want something a little more hefty macho, might not be your thing. Now, where you do have a benefit of coming late into the industry is the early smartwatches, a lot of them, not the Apple Watch, but a lot of the Android ones we saw, they were very big and very heavy because component miniaturization. You know, now every year they can make things smaller. So the RAM chips, squeezing in the GPS, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, cellular, all of this stuff can take up less space. So this doesn't have to be a big honking watch. That said, it's available in only one size, 41 millimeter, which is usually considered the small-wristed person's watch or the woman's watch size. So for some of you, it might seem kind of small. I mean, it fits me. I have a 152 millimeter wrist, which is around 6 inches, pretty small. And you do get 2 band sizes in the box. It comes bundled with this sport band here. We'll talk about the bands a bit more later. So that's something to keep in mind. It's smallish. It's minimalist. It's got no sharp edges whatsoever in terms of design. I like the look of Samsung's Galaxy Watch 5, which to me looked pretty chill and organic, but this is a whole lot even smoother. There are just no right angles anywhere. The glass face is domed, which might look really pretty, but it is thus more vulnerable to damage because it's the thing that's sticking out, right? No bezel certainly protecting it, and a very high piece of Gorilla Glass 5. They call it 3D because it's curved, but it's Gorilla Glass 5. It'll be scratch resistant, but I would say if you're the mountaineering type, you might crack it. The case for the price, which starts at $350 and it's only $50 more if you want to add on 4G LTE, is recycled stainless steel. They say it's 80% recycled stainless steel. I assume the other 20% is not recycled stainless steel as opposed to some other metal. I don't know. So anyway, that casing should be pretty durable, and it's a nice shiny finish. You can get it in 4 different colors, which you can see on screen right now. It's a little bit of a two-tone body on it, obviously just because you got the black of the glass and then whatever casing material is. The underside is also very domed. I'm not sure why, but it is. So you best want to use the puck charger that comes with the watch. Now, I did put it on one of Samsung's dual-use chargers that can charge Qi smartphones and also Samsung Galaxy watches, and if I pushed it down, it would work and it would charge, but there's so much curvature that obviously you're not going to charge it by putting a weight on top of your watch, right? So there's that. Comfort-wise, the dominess of the underside where all the sensors are, it doesn't feel uncomfortable. And the way the lugs are designed, not that it actually has lugs, it has a mount much like the Apple Watch style one design. It's got a good deal of radius to it, so that means if you have a smaller wrist, it will curve around the wrist instead of sticking out and then getting pulled down. Yay. The bands on this, they're very Apple-esque, shall we say. And Google clearly didn't hide some things that watchOS does and Apple Land and all that sort of things in terms of user interface elements like the power on, power off, long lozenge buttons. Though you don't slide those, you just tap on them. But anyway, the standard sport bands are a lot like Apple Watch bands. They're fluoroelastomer as well, which is good. They're hypoallergenic. They're relatively speaking breathed for something that is, well, a rubbery, plasticky sort of material, right? The clasping mechanism is a little bit different and more complicated. In fact, when you turn the watch on, one of the things it does, it gives you instructions on how to actually put the watch on your wrist, which you wouldn't think would be necessary, but Anyway, I like the bands pretty well. They're $50 for this kind of band, this sport band here. Pricing is similar to Apple, actually, in some cases more expensive. They have Milanese coming, the stainless steel Milanese mesh, which I always like. That will be out in spring of 2023, and those will be $130, where Apple charges $100. You get leather bands for $80, which is $20 cheaper than Apple. And then there's a stainless steel traditional men's link sort of thing that costs $200. Ow. Lastly, there are woven bands, sport bands that are $60. So it's a decent selection. I'm sure third-party ones will show up. The band attachment method is unique, I'll give them that. It's less fidgety and doesn't require little fingernails and all that sort of thing like Samsung Galaxy watches do to swap the bands. It's not as easy as the push button on Apple watches, to be sure. There is a little bit of a push button on the edge, each band end on one side, and while Google says that they were inspired by the way you put DSLR lenses on, camera lenses, I mean, I'm a photographer, I put lenses on in my sleep. Trust me, this is not like that, really. It's more fiddly and a bit more difficult, mostly because the button's a little hard to depress. You use the band to kind of depress it. I don't know. It could be easier, it could be worse. That is what it is. When it comes to buttons, just like the Apple Watch and the Samsung Galaxy Watch, we have a digital crown, and it feels nice. I like the crown, and it's easy enough to operate. And you have a side button as well, serving the same functions as on those other two watches for the most part. You have a digital crown to get back home or to see all your apps. The right smaller button is for things like initiating Google Pay, which it supports, and multitasking and all that. That little side button is really hard to press, in part because it's on the underside of the curvature of the watch, and it's very stiff. And it makes an audible click when you click it too, like you can hear it in the room. It's weird. So I kind of stopped using that button as much as I could. In terms of performance, you're looking at a 4-year-old dual-core processor on board here that we saw in 2018 Samsung Galaxy watches. So that could be unnerving, but Apple, you know, they like to add their own little clever coprocessors, and they have this Cortex coprocessor that can handle some things like keeping track of your heart rate without using as much power as the main processor would, for example. This is an shall we say, not mature platform, so some performance hiccups could also have to do with that more than just the hardware, but I did see occasional animation stutters and things like that. Not egregious, but it reminds me of like several years ago in smartwatch land when they just were not that responsive and fast. Only occasionally. Other times it can be very zippy when you're navigating through anything on the watch. You have 2 gigs of RAM, which is more than usual, though, for a smartwatch, and you got your 32 gigs of storage, so you know any data you're keeping about activity tracking, all that sort of thing, music, podcasts, Spotify stuff, you know, local storage, you've got that going on. The watch face selection is cute, pleasing. You have informational ones, you have simple ones, and you have complications. Again, unlike the Apple Watch that you can add more information to. They work for me. I'm a simple woman. I don't need the world's fanciest watch faces or a choice of 500 to be happy with that. In terms of apps and the interface, it's streamlined. It's simple, but not in a bad way. I think in a good way. I mean, obviously, we would love to see more apps for this. There are a variety of fitness apps and stuff like that. And you've got your basics, you've got your timer, you've got your world clock, you know, the core stuff that you need. Notifications, top notch. Google does that just great. If you want to talk to Google, you can do that. You just press that stiff side button there and you can talk to Google. So that stuff is good. The one thing, now pretty much all smartwatches use a companion fitness app, whether it's Samsung's Health app, Apple's Health app. In this case, because Google bought Fitbit several years ago, we have the Fitbit app, which is popular enough, and I would call it for the average person's exercise needs fine. The user interface to me looks maybe a little like it could stand a refresh, but the data that you want is mostly there. But if you're more hardcore, there are obviously more hardcore alternatives. Even Samsung and Apple have gotten more hardcore in the data that they present and track and all that sort of thing, and obviously Garmin and other fitness watches, but it's okay. But the bad part is, and that's why I would like to re-review this in a couple of months, and I might, because we'll get to hold on to this. Where's my data? That kept happening. So when it comes to not notifications, boom, they're there instantly for smart stuff. But with Fitbit, so I do sleep tracking. It automatically detects sleep. You don't have to tell it I'm going to sleep. At least we're not back in 2016 or something with that. And I wake up in the morning and I look at it 5 minutes after I've woken up and it still says, you haven't been sleeping. And I'm like, oh no, man, I got to do a review. Where's all my data being tracked? And then 10 minutes later, it said, hey, you have been sleeping, but I can't tell you much about it yet. And I'm like, oh snap, we are back in 2016. And then I look at the phone and it says, yeah, I got some data here. I'm crunching it. And then within a half an hour, it came back to the watch. Okay. I'm hoping that this gets better within a couple of months of software updates, right? Because that integration is not real firm. Likewise with exercise tracking. So it doesn't have much in the way of automatic exercise detection, but if you've been walking, the predefined time is 15 minutes, it'll start tracking. You can change that to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you want. It does not the greatest job. You won't get any GPS data when it does automatic tracking. Then there's when I wanted to test it using the rowing machine, right? I mean, that's only slightly obscure, not very much. So the watch showed like 12 exercise types, workout types at first. And there was no way to add more. And I'm like, this is supposed to support 40 types. I waited overnight, 16 hours later, all 40 are on the watch without it saying it got an OS update or anything like that. So that wasn't it. It's these early adopter kind of problems that I would like to see cleared up before I can totally recommend this watch to people who are certainly fitness addicts. In terms of sleep tracking, it's pretty good. Now, I didn't use, there's a Fitbit premium subscription. You do get 6 months to try it if you wish to, but I just stuck with the core standard features there, and you do get sleep tracking, and it does show you your different sleep stages. And as to which is the most accurate, who knows, unless you go to a sleep study room to double check on. GPS I had no problems with. Speaking of OS updates, I did get an OS update immediately out of the box that addressed some GPS issues. So if you see some really early reviews before that update came out and they said the GPS was wonky, that's not a problem anymore as far as I can tell. It worked just fine as a standard single band GPS going out in a run with a good view of the sky, that sort of thing. It does have a heart rate monitor, of course. It does not do the blood oxygen sensing. It has the hardware, so maybe it will do it in the future. You can do an on-demand ECG. There is no AFib notification, however. As for other creature comforts, of course you have Bluetooth here, primary way of communicating with the phone. Like I said, LTE is optional. You can choose your carrier with that. Uses an eSIM like all smartwatches do. And it has a lovely 1.6-inch OLED display that has 1000 nits of brightness. I found it easy enough to see in outdoor sunshine. Now you can do the lift to wake thing and it brightens up. I found it was a little slower to do that when I was exercising outdoors, so I was kind of trying not to stumble while lifting to wake. Again, software can tweak that sort of thing. It has an always-on display. And this is where I feel like we're going back to like 2016 again, where yay, they just started to have always-on displays, but they really tanked the battery life. The always-on display will tank the battery life here. So I actually wore it for sleep tracking, and I assumed, like some other smartwatches who shall not be named, that when it detects you're sleeping, it basically turns off the display, so you're not distracted by bright light in your eyes every time your hand goes anywhere near you. And to save power, well, it left the always-on display on overnight. It went from 100% charge to 54% for an 8-hour sleep session. So that gives you an idea of always-on display will use a lot of battery power. That's too bad. It's a 294 milliamp hour battery. And it takes about 80 minutes for like a 0 to full charge, but you can get a pretty decent charge in about 30 minutes or so, bring it at least up to 50% from nearly empty. But anyway, yeah, I mean, I want to have always on display, sorry, so I guess I'll just live with it, but it would be hard certainly to go a full day without charging it up at some point if you wanted to wear it at night for sleep tracking. So that's the Pixel Watch by Google, finally. And it's got cutting-edge looking design and miniaturization. It's got some lovely bands, and it has some kind of out-of-date problems, things like syncing just with the fitness data and the fitness app and all that sort of thing. So clearly it's a work in progress right now. It is their first attempt, and I will do a follow-up on this one because I think it probably will get better. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this vid.